Hey folks, Kevin here. Well, it's April 21st, 2021, and today I want to talk about some of the differences between purchasing dormant plants, potted plants, and what you do with them, and the differences between planting and transplanting. So when we're talking about bare-rooted trees or bushes, we're talking about plants that are in a dormant state. They're not actively growing. They're not putting out leaves, putting out flowers, and growing more roots and all. They're in. It's like they're asleep for the winter months. And they're actually my favorite for selling and for buying. And the reason for that is they're less expensive, because if you're buying a potted plant, you're paying for the pot, you're paying for the time with the soil, you're paying for the time with watering it and caring for the plants as well. Whereas the relative costs are relatively minimal compared to a potted plant. A bare-rooted plant species is usually much less expensive. But there are some limitations. These dormant plants are usually taken out of the ground by the nursery during sometime between November through to when spring breaks in the earliest part of the year. So November through March possibly. And it depends on where you are in the country, of course. So these plants may be taken out in a large nursery during November and December, and the workers all go and pull all of these trees and bushes out of the ground, and then they maintain them. Since they're in a dormant state, the roots can get damaged somewhat. They don't have to worry about transpiration because the leaves and the flowers being out, no energy is being expended by the plants. So they're in very much a quiescent phase of their development stage of life, and then they can be healed in. They can be put into a cool, dark area where all the air is removed from around the root systems. The soil is packed around. It could be mulch, could be sawdust, could be any number of different materials, and the moisture content is maintained around the root structures, and they're kept cool and dark. And that way they can prolong the period of dormancy, even though they're shipping it to a place where with the other trees, the leaves are already coming out, the flowers are out, and that sort of thing. So the advantages are they're less expensive, there's less plastics being put into the environment, less soil being moved, and when you're transporting soil, you can transport diseases. So there's a lot of good benefits to buying or selling bare-rooted plants. And I sell potted plants as well. What else did I want to say? So the best times to get the bare-rooted plants into the ground is as soon as you get them delivered to you or you pick them up. You know, you can plant bare-rooted plants if you get them even in June or whatever, but there's more of a stress, less of their period for development is shortened, so that affects the plant. So it's not going to do quite as well, but they can still do fairly well. But I love bare-rooted plants for the reason that it's more environmentally friendly, it's less work and time and energy for the person running the nursery, and they're less expensive for people purchasing them. You can get those plants right into the ground right off the bat as soon as you get them. If you don't have time to get them in and it's a week before you're going to be able to get them into the ground, you heal them in at your home as well. In other words, you can put several plants together, a dozen plants together, and just keep no air spaces around the root structures themselves. You want to remove all air. You want to keep nice moist material, whether it's mulch, sawdust, soil, whatever it is, and just keep the plants cool and dark. You don't want them out in the sun. So that's my 2 cents about bare-rooted plants. Now, potted plants, when you're picking those up from the nursery, for the most part, the best thing to do is to get it into the ground right away, even if it's June, July, August and all. Get those plants into the ground. One of the mistakes people make is they buy the plants and they think they look great and they put them on their asphalt driveway or in their concrete driveway, and before you know it, since the leaves are all out on these plants, they may be flowering and all, they're really expending a lot of energy. The roots start to get heated up. They're often in black pots. The sun can radiate on it. The moisture evaporates from or through transpiration, or from the soil surface evaporates as well. So it's one of the things that, especially during those really hot days, those potted plants need to be watered at least once a day, sometimes twice a day, when you have these really hot times and all. So it's really good to get those potted plants into the ground right away. I got a question recently, okay, like right now it's snowing out, we've got a couple of days of hard frost, and the couple bought quite a few different plants, and they said, geez, we're going to have some freezes in the next couple of days. And I can see that's really good thought processes, but the truth is, the quicker you get them into the ground, these perennial plants, whether it's raspberry bushes or currants or whatever it may be, if they're a potted plant, get them into the ground right away. Now, if you bought potted plants, now there's some caveats, like some big box stores will have some plants that were grown out down south that have already leafed out, that are in pots. And if you're going to have ice storms and wind storms and all, excuse me, one of the things you want to do is possibly not get that wind into the plant, because the freeze is going to destroy all the leaf structure on those plants. So those ones you may want to put into your garage or your home. Don't have them too warm, and you have to keep them watered, but wait until that freeze spell is over with. It's always best to buy plants that have, especially your perennial plants, that are for your zone, your climate, so that you don't have to worry about it. Now, we do sell fig trees, but those we tell people you got to bring them in. Like right now would not be a good time. That's one of the reasons I didn't bring the fig trees outside with the rest of the nursery stock, because they're putting on new growth, and they are not appropriate for zone 5A, which we live in. So they're still inside of the coop, so we're not bringing them out and putting them on the weed mats. So there are those caveats where you don't want to do it. But if they're all leafed out and you know that there's not going to be a frost gnaw, get it into the ground right off the bat. If they're a perennial that's used to the frost, like gooseberries and currants and all of those, and blueberry plants that have already that are beginning to leaf out right now, these frosts won't harm those ones. Now, these heavy frosts will bother some of the ones like the fruit trees, the plums, the cherries and the plums. If it gets down cold enough for a couple of days, which it may be, it may damage the flowers, and the insects may not be able to pollinate all of those fruit trees that are out right now, or that are flowering. And this is April 21st in Zone 5A, Oswego, New York. I think I covered all that I wanted to cover with the bare roots and the potted plants. So one thing I would say is, lots of people buy those potted plants, they bring them home and let them set for a week or two. It'd be best if you could plan everything ahead of time. If you know you're going to go to the store and you're going to pick up plants, and I know it's so exciting. I've done the same thing. You see this plant and you see that one there, or it's on sale. You grab a bunch, you bring them home, and all. Have a backup plan. If you know that you're going to do some impulse buying, have a backup plan for where you can keep them as well. Oh, the other thing I would say is, when you're going to pick up plants, when you're going to a nursery and all, find out, especially bare roots, you need to have your vehicle set up for it. It could be cardboard, it could be a piece of tarp in there, because we're not shipping them to keep costs down. There's not some container that we're putting them in. So asking ahead of time, what should I bring? Some people will bring down a blanket and put it down as well. Now, for those trees and plants that are already leafed out, and you're traveling more than a couple of miles and you've got an open pickup truck or whatever, even though you wouldn't think that 35 miles an hour or 55 miles per hour wouldn't damage a leafed out tree, you need to be aware that that's going to do a lot of damage. That transpiration, those leaves are going to become desiccated right off the bat. So covering them, wrapping those appropriately, bringing the appropriate supplies, whether it's twine or rope or tarps or sheets, whatever it may be, to protect the foliage from wind damage as well. Everything that I'm talking about, I've made mistakes with, so don't feel bad if you've made some of these mistakes. I'm just making this video so it's easier for people to think about ahead of time. Another thing that I think is important is understanding the difference between planting and transplanting. Now, of course, I spend a lot of time talking about transplanting when I'm talking about in our vegetable gardens. We direct seed some plants, so we plant the seeds in the gardens, and we use a little seeding tool, a Jang seeder to do that, or our Earthway seeder. And we start our seedlings inside the work area. There's lots of plants growing over in there this year. I'll have to pot up some of the tomato plants because they're outgrowing their 72 cell flats, and I need to put them in some larger cells. So I'm not talking about that type of transplanting. So those plants, one of the things I would say is those plants need to be hardened off, because they've been grown inside of controlled conditions inside of a work area. And as a result, they're only exposed to very low winds, pretty consistent temperatures, not major fluctuations, because evenings get cool, days can get really hot and dry, get real windy. So we have to harden those plants off by gradually bringing them outside and exposing them to the elements. It might be there, but 1 hour on day one, be out for an hour and a half or 2 hours on day two, and we do that over a week. It could be 2 weeks period depending on the sensitivity of the plants. So those potted up, or those initial cells, we transplant out into the gardens. The seeds, we direct seed, or we plant the seeds. Now when you're picking up different trees, like some of the plants that I'm digging up that are the bare root, we can get those into the ground right away if it's a very short distance, that have leafed out with some of the really hardy varieties, some of the ribes, so gooseberries, the currants and all. They can go right into the ground if it's already planned ahead of time to get those into the ground, and that's transplanting. But if there's any delay whatsoever in the timing, or the leaves are really fully leafed out, it's not a wise thing to go ahead and transplant a tree into another place. So once the trees have leafed out, and especially since the buds are more than just emerging with the leaves, or the flower buds are emerging, then you shouldn't be doing transplanting. Now, if you know that you're going to be transplanting a bush or a tree like a Japanese red maple, then what you can do is you can go out ahead of time when the plant is still dormant. You can dig and damage the roots. In other words, get the root ball, have the soil still in contact with it. So we're not talking about bare root. We're talking about using a shovel and digging all the way around the circumference of the base of the tree, and severing all of the small roots around the perimeter. That shocks the tree a little bit, but it doesn't shock it very much because it's in a dormant state. I don't know that it shocks it at all, quite honestly. You can trim the roots when they're dormant, just as I talked about, you're leaving the soil ball there, and then you can either wrap it with burlap, or you put some cloth around it or paper around it, or you can just repile very loose, easy soil around it. Then, as long as you don't wait too long, that tree can be transplanted. It can be put into a pot packed with soil around it. But the key thing about transplanting that plant is that you started the transplanting process. You took the plant, you disrupted the root structure while it was dormant, then you just healed it in a sense. You're putting soil around the base of it. so that no air is getting exposed to those roots, because they'll do what's called air pruning. Those roots will die back if exposed to air. So there is that exception that you can go ahead and transplant a tree that it has been leafed out, but the process starts before it's leafed out. That's really important to realize. So those are the things to think about. The other things I would say is to think about what are the needs, putting the plant in the right space, making sure you've got the apparatuses to meet the plant's needs. I think prepping the site beforehand is really good. So if you've got a goal list as far as what plants you want, and I'll make more videos of these different topics in the future as well. One of the things I will say is that depending on the species, but there's relatively few species of trees and bushes and plants that aren't benefited from mycorrhizal microorganisms. These are mycorrhizal fungi. Okay, so I ran down to the refrigerator in the garage to grab a product, and I'm going to talk about this mycos, which is a mycorrhizal fungi composed of both endo and ecto mycorrhizae. I've mentioned that it's always good to prepare your site ahead of time so that you know when you're planting a seed, transplanting a plant into that site, or planting a potted plant into your gardens or into your landscape. One of the things that I mentioned is when the roots have been damaged, so even in a pot, the roots can get root bound, and the best thing to do is to actually disturb those peripheral roots on the outside of the pot and break them up somewhat so that they will, instead of trying to keep going around in a circle and be limited as far as the nutrient made available to those roots, because they're all heading in the wrong direction. So disturbing the roots in a potted plant can be beneficial to allow more nutrients and water to be available to the plant. And I mentioned that when we want to take a bare root plant out, while they have very, very few small root hairs out as well, even though the plant is dormant, it'd be wonderful if we had a way to increase the absorptive capacity of those plants. And that's one of the things that, hundreds of thousands of years ago, a relationship developed between fungi, the fungal kingdom, and the plant kingdom. And with just some exceptions, the plants really have a mutually beneficial symbiotic relationship with fungi. And so this product, which is called mycos, and I'll put a link down below in the description to an Amazon. It is an Amazon affiliate link, so if you click on it and you buy something, it helps us out on our channel, it helps me be able to spend more time making more videos and all. But this is a pure mycorrhizal inoculum composed of both ectomycorrhizae and endomycorrhizae. And I've made videos about this stuff in the past, but in short, there's spores inside of the system. The way that plants reproduce for the most part is producing seeds, except for the asexual reproductions that we talk about. And the way that fungi reproduces by the spores. So by putting these spores next to the roots, it's going to facilitate the opportunity for these to make their connection. So I mentioned, when we're digging up plants, they have very, very few small, fine root hairs going out, or if we're planting a plant that's got the roots that have been encompassed within a pot, they've been circulating around, we're damaging the roots some. And in order to have an expansion of the absorptive capacity, increasing the relative surface area of the plant to be able to have more nutrients and water available to it, and to therefore be more productive, be healthier, be more disease resistant, more pest resistant, be able to withstand periods of harsher weather and all. This symbiotic relationship is very, very important. So what ends up happening is if you can prepare, if you have some of this material beforehand, before you plant some of your seeds or transplant some of the plants or plant your plants that you picked up at the nursery, if you realize, okay, this plant is root bound, I'm going to disturb the roots some, and then right around the surface of it, you put some of these mycorrhizal spores next to it. What the plant does is when it's in the soil, it sends out little chemical communicators out into the soil, and if that reaches the spores will start to make their hyphae, and so the spores emerge into hyphae, and these hyphae are so tiny they can be between 10% to 2% of the width of a hair. So unless you're looking under a microscope, you won't even see these. But there's an extension where the hyphae from the spore reaches the roots, and it either gets inside of these, that would go through the cell wall and creates a network there, or it sits on the outside. So that's the endo or ecto mycorrhizal fungi. And this exchange system, the plant, what it does is through photosynthesis, it sends these simple sugars down and feeds the fungal organisms. The fungal organism goes ahead and exchanges all of the minerals and nutrients and water to the plant. So there's this exchange system. It's like having a team of workers working for the plant's benefit. So the plant gets all of these beautiful nutrients, get the appropriate amount of water as well. And even between the root hairs on a tree, these hyphae will really expand. I guess if you looked at a cotton ball and saw just how the mesh network that's there, wouldn't it be wonderful if even between the roots those nutrients were made available to that plant by extension of the hyphal fungal network around the roots. So by realizing that this is one potential advantage, with the exception of a few plants, so your brassicas, there's no documented beneficial relationship between the mycorrhizal fungi and the brassicas, blueberries, beets, and I can't think of the rest of the plants, but well over 80%, I believe it's over 80% of the plants in the plant kingdom benefit from a symbiotic, mutually beneficial relationship with the mycorrhizal fungi. So there are ways of trying to enhance the system, and I've talked in previous videos about companion plants and guilds, so that if we have different plants, that the mycorrhizal fungi that create this network, it's like having the internet. So if you want to go online and buy something from this place, or go to a PubMed online and get medical information, or look up whatever it is, you can take courses online. Well, the internet is this network that connects all of these different resources, so that you could have run your business from your home. And a tree, the mycorrhizal fungi, is like that internet. It communicates between the other plants that are around the area. So if you have an apple tree that you're planting, and you're planting different companion plants around the apple tree, even though it may be in a lawn, and you mulch that area right around the apple tree, that apple tree will have a symbiotic relationship with the fungi, which has a symbiotic relationship, a mutually beneficial relationship with all of the other plants. So everyone benefits as a result of it. So by being aware of these, getting the hedge on the system. So if you got a bacterial dominated soil that's only been grass and weeds for many years, and you want to put in some beautiful plants into the area, By thinking about the process ahead of time, knowing the bushes, the plants, and the supporting species, building a guild, building a set of companion plants that can all work together, and utilizing the internet or the highway that connects all of these plants together, can be extremely beneficial. And therefore, the less amount of work that we have to do as gardeners, we let the plants do the work for us by expanding their capacity to exchange nutrients and water amongst each other. So if you found this video of value, please give us a thumbs up, share it with your friends. If you like buying things on Amazon, please use our affiliate link down below. That always helps us out. No matter what it is that you buy, it doesn't cost you anything extra. If you found the video of value, share it with your friends as well. And good gardening to all of you, and stay healthy. Take care. Bye-bye now.